And joining us now with more perspective on the U.S. troop withdrawal is Washington Post reporter Dan Lamont. Dan, thanks for being with us. Let's start with the president's admission here. He feels that the Afghan forces are able to take control of the situation. What if the country slides now into a civil war?
There's a very strong chance that it could. All the indications are right now that that we're heading toward more bloodshed. The Taliban continue to take over districts. They continue to encircle provincial capitals, sort of their state capitals. And the idea is that the fear right now is that at some point, as Afghan security forces continue to either be overrun or lay down their arms, that there could be a tipping point.
Dan, politically, what are the pros and cons for the president? I mean, he has criticism on both sides of the aisle.
It's a complicated issue, and this is something that I think emerged with President Trump as well, because what we've seen is that this is not a kind of classic red versus blue issue. President Biden looks at it in a lot of ways very similarly to President Trump did. You've got a scenario where he's very skeptical of what he's hearing from the Pentagon. He's very skeptical that anything can change. And he looks at these vast numbers of service members that have deployed. Close to 800,000 Americans in uniform have served there at one time or another, and says, why do we need to continue to do this?
Dan, I know you're not a historian here, but let's look at the history of this. The mission was supposed to end in 2014 as part of an agreement with NATO, but year after year that dragged on. Why do you think that that was the case?
I think because in a lot of ways there were a lot of warning signs back in 2014 that if the United States had exited then, you'd be seeing a lot of these same things. So it was always sort of stiff-arming the history that could be coming around the corner.
The president says that the U.S. will keep a diplomatic presence there. But basically, you know, why now? Why switch it to August 31st instead of September 11th as original deadline?
I think there's a couple things that might be emerging there. For one, all indications are that the drawdown is effectively over already. They already have given up all the bases with the exception of a small one next to the embassy. There is virtually no U.S. fighting forces left. The Pentagon said last week that it was more than 90% complete, and I think that might be actually underselling what's left. The second piece is when they initially used that September 11th date, it got some backlash. A lot of people didn't like the symbolism there. They found it disrespectful. So I think it's just as easy to say by August 31st.
Dan, I did some reporting as long as 8 years ago about the interpreter issue, trying to get special immigrant visas for those Afghans who worked alongside U.S. forces. Can you talk about the protections that are in place for those interpreters that are still in the country that are facing daily threats?
This is an issue that I don't think the Biden administration quite has its arms wrapped around yet. President Biden today said that flights will start soon. This month to start getting interpreters who want to leave out, presumably with their families. But we're talking, if you start talking about the interpreters and their families, we're talking tens of thousands of people potentially. And we hear lots of individual stories of interpreters who served in the eyes of the American service member that they know honorably and with courage. And yet they run into a variety of problems when it comes to things like an individual small argument years back where they have been denied several times and continue to appeal.
Well, the president did say he will welcome them to the U.S., correct?
That's really the discrepancy here is who and how many.
We did talk about the Taliban here, but some in Congress say now is a mistake for American troops to withdraw here because of the possibility of a reemergence from al-Qaeda and ISIS. How likely a scenario is that?
I've heard a lot of concern on that part, particularly retired general officers, intelligence community, things of that sort. The way it's being cast right now is that the Biden administration will be able to carry out counterterrorism, not against the Taliban, but specifically al-Qaeda, ISIS, that sort of threat where they actually might want to plan an attack in the United States from a, quote, over-the-horizon sort of style. When you talk to a lot of the experts that have done this sort of work, they say that when you exit with the military, a lot of the intelligence gathering has to end with it because the security disappears. So the big concern becomes, how well are you actually able to track something going on in the Afghan mountains or in some of these cities that fall?
Washington Post reporter Dan Lamothe, thank you so much. Be safe, be well.
Thank you.